Do you wish that all things wealth and finance were much easier to understand and not presented by a bunch of beige cardigan-wearing geeks? Welcome to the Clever Investor podcast, where we're dishing up the easiest to understand finance program served in bite-sized chunks, so your brain will thank you as your knowledge grows. Hosted by the brilliant Owen Taylor, a multiple award-winning expert with a glorious knack for explaining the complex world of wealth in the simplest of ways.
Hey Clever Investors, and welcome to another show. As I've mentioned on a previous Clever Investor podcast, I'm actually a Rentvester. Made the decision many years ago, and it works out just fine for me. And I get to talk to a lot of people. I even run some webinars on how to be a Rentvester and the advantages and the disadvantages. But one of the biggest pushbacks I get from people is, that they always feel like they're about to be kicked out of the property that they're in, that there's no sort of longevity of security. So I had to think about this. Thought I'd call my friend and long-term work colleague, Helen Matsoukas. And what Helen doesn't know about the rental property side of the market, you could write on a pinhead with a pneumatic drill.
Hello, this is Helen.
Helen, it's Owen.
Hi, Owen. How are you?
Good. Can you spare a few moments? I've got a quick question. I want your opinion. So as you know, I'm a Rentvester. And when I speak to people about being a Rentvester and the reasons why and my advantages for doing it, one of the biggest pushbacks I get is, I'm so fed up with, having to move out my rental property. I've lived in 3 different properties in the last 5 years and the owners want to move back in, So because you've got a world of experience on the other side, on the rental side of things, what would be your top tips for when someone's selecting a property to rent to live in?
Well, I guess the first thing that I would do, because I always put myself in the shoes of a Rentvester or any kind of tenant to begin with, and if I'm looking for an investment or looking for a property to live in, I really would be wanting to ask the right questions, So property managers should know everything that there is to know about the property that they're looking after. So they'll know if their landlord is an investor, or if it's principal place of residence, or they're planning on moving back into it, that sort of thing. So there's nothing wrong with tenants really asking those questions and saying, can you tell me, is it an investor that owns this property, and what are their plans? Obviously, things can change, so whatever the property manager is going to come back and say to you, it's always going to be in the back of your mind that people's circumstances may change. So an investor may then decide to, sell a property, or be forced to sell a property, or wanting to invest somewhere else, or wanting to, maybe move in because of change of work or whatever the case may be. But I think tenants really have an opportunity now where they can be really open and say, you know what, I'm wanting to move into this property. I can offer the landlord longevity. I'm looking at a long-term lease. Are they open to that? There's just ways around asking those questions just to really get a gauge on what kind of property they're going into and whether or not there's going to be any issues short term.
So when someone's putting in an application for a property, or even talking to the agent at the property, be upfront. Look, I'm actually a Rentvester. I have an investment property.
100%.
And putting that down on the application, would that score well for you when you're reviewing?
Yeah, because if I'm the property manager and I'm assessing your application, I'll be like, Owen's a Rentvester. That means he's wanting to do this long term. I'd probably even negotiate with you and say, would you be willing to sign? If I know my landlord is definitely an investor and they're wanting something long term, especially off the back of what we've experienced the last 2 years, where we've had people just walk out of tenancies and stuff like that. Any landlord would appreciate their property manager coming to them and saying, I've got this fantastic tenant. His name's Owen. He's got a great job. He's an Rentvester, so he's got his own investment properties, but he's looking at something long term. We may be able to negotiate something with him to secure him long term, which means that you don't have to worry about change of tenants. He's not going anywhere. he's locked in and we're good. So yeah, absolutely. I think, having that conversation or having those details on your application. Now, with application forms for tenants these days, there's really not scope or an opportunity for tenants to specify that kind of stuff because they're very strict on what questions can be asked and what can't be asked. But, you can volunteer that information with a cover email or something like that, or even just picking up the phone and speaking to the property manager and just telling them what the scenario is. If it's a good property manager, she'll jump at the chance and want to secure you as a tenant, 100%.
So when you just mentioned long term, does that mean you can lease a property for longer than 12 months?
Yeah. So the legislation for most states is the Residential Tenancies Act covers the same legislation for tenancies up to 5 years. So anything beyond 5 years, there's some changes with some of the parts of the legislation. So property managers can actually secure a lease for a landlord up to 5 years. Now, depending on everyone's circumstances, and unless you've got a rent increase built in every year up, you wouldn't want to secure someone just for 5 years because you don't know what the market's going to do. Demand might, skyrocket, which is what we're having now. So you really want to, jump on those opportunities to increase the rent because at the end of the day, you are an investor and you are doing this for a purpose. But yeah, a tenant can definitely ask for anything above 12 months without a doubt.
So let's say that somebody agrees for maybe 2 or 3 years, but in the proposal that the agent puts back together on behalf of their landlord, there's an increase each year. Should you be scared of that? Should you be upset about it's going to go up a bit each year?
I think that it all depends on your circumstances and what's going to work for you. If you're, smart in the sense of going, this is what I need. I need a secure home. I don't want to be bothered with, the possibility of the property being sold. Then, it's just as simple as, putting those increases in place, looking at your budget and going, it's worthwhile me taking these increases. I know what I'm going to get. I can see what my increases are going to be, and look at the pros and cons of that compared to what if I just sign a 12-month lease. In 12 months, I may have to move anyway. What are my removalist costs? What are my reconnection costs? Because there's, fees for disconnecting and reconnecting, that sort of stuff, postal, it's just such a painful process moving anyway. So, and that can potentially happen again in 12 months' time. So I would definitely be looking at that and going, okay, I've got these rent increases. I know what I've got. This is my worst case scenario. Will it work for me? And can I do it? And yeah, I would definitely consider it if I was a tenant.
So really what you're saying is you've actually got to put the same amount of effort into looking for the right rental property as you actually have buying a property anyway. There is a method and a system to doing it effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about it, I think, with finding an investment property, both you and I have had conversations about not being emotional about it and looking at the dollars and looking as to why you're doing it and your long-term gain. Whereas, there's more emotion into finding your home. So, I would think that tenants, should be at a point where they are thinking, well, is this property good for me? What are the amenities like? I'm going to get the benefit of having the amenities at my doorstep. This is going to work for me. Obviously, people already know location, where they want to be. So, they're all the factors that I think would come into play, and they do need to put a little bit of effort into, researching and looking at all those things so that they're, happy in their home. At the end of the day, it's their home. You are a rentvestor yourself, as you mentioned. You have a home. That's your home. So, these things are, you'll have a list of things that you want to tick to say, yep, this is going to be the home for me and my son, and we're going to enjoy it. And I would think that warrants a little bit of research and work.
Now, here's a loaded question. I know the answer to this, okay. All right, but you can hang pictures on the wall in the rental property, can't you?
Yes, you can. Legislation is different in every state, but essentially someone wants to hang a picture in a property. Before, the process was you had to get written permission from the landlord. Now, you're an investor as well, and for me, I don't want to be bothered with my tenant or a property manager calling me, asking me permission if the tenant can hang, a calendar on the back of the bathroom door or something like that, whatever the case is. I think we're all busy enough and smart enough, and I think it should just be a normal, respectable thing where you kind of go, you know what, I'm going to put it up. When I leave, I'm going to fix it. And that's essentially what the rules are now. So the tenants can actually put a picture up wherever they want. They can put 30,000 pictures up if they want. They don't need to get permission as such from the landlord. Some people still ask for permission, but at the end of the tenancy, they need to rectify the property. So the ones asking for permission are basically saying, I'm going to put 5 picture hooks up and I'm going to leave them when I leave. And then the landlord can say, yes, that's perfectly fine, no issue. Or they're just going to go ahead and do it. And then, but when they leave, they'll need to putty up that hole, fix it, and return it basically to the same state that it was given to them.
Thank you, Helen, for your time.
Not a problem, Owen. Have a good day.
You have been listening to the Clever Investor podcast, proudly sponsored this week by Blue Wealth Property. Are you ready to start a new investment journey? Get in touch with the industry leaders, Blue Wealth Property. Blue Wealth have a proven track record in using research to identify growth markets, and Blue Wealth have supported thousands of Australians to buy the right property in the right market at the right time. Go to bluewealth.com.au.